session. We have three very esteemed panelists today from different walks of life, and I think Rubina would be doing the introduction. So over to you, Rubina. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shubhrajyoti, and welcome one and all to this the second part in the I4N Tribe webinar series. It's a great pleasure to be interacting with you, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of takeaway messages from this. I4N has, and I've been associated with the platform, so I know, has been this wonderful bridge to be able to get the private sector, to provide the private sector platform to contribute towards the government's flagship nutrition program. And again, once again, it's taken off a very wonderful initiative to be able to project what the I4N partners are doing towards contributing towards relief measures for COVID. We are in very different and different times, something that we've never experienced before, and it's wonderful to see how the private sector has been collaborating and come together, putting forward their means and ways to help overcome this emergency situation that we are in. And so with this brief introduction, I will move on to our participants, to our panelists, all three of them who are I4N pledged partners and have been doing some really wonderful relief work towards COVID, very innovative, very different, and also sort of lending the hand or helping to bridge the gap and complementing the government is already doing. So I'll start off with Dr. Shailendra Hegde, who is from Piramal Swasthya. Welcome, Dr. Hegde. It's a pleasure having you with us. Piramal Swasthya has always had wonderful collaborative projects with the government, and their relief operations span from operating the 104 helpline across 7 states in India and supporting the government in active surveillance as well as follow-up of quarantine cases, and they address issues of nutrition, food safety. I invite Dr. Hegde. I request you, sir, to please elaborate on the activities that you are doing for our understanding. Dr. Hegde.
Thank you, Rubina. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel. I think COVID-19 has shaken up the entire humanity, and India has not in any way been different. So what I would like to first place on record is that these are very tough times, and I think overall the way every aspect of the government machinery, the non-government machinery, various organizations have come together to address COVID-19 is absolutely commendable. So coming to Piramal Swasthya is a not-for-profit society. We are a part of Piramal Foundation. Piramal Foundation, of course, is the philanthropic arm of Piramal Enterprises. Even I still remember actually in the first week of March when just the cases had just started, I remember Mr. Piramal spending time with us trying to understand more about COVID-19 and asking us to start thinking about how will this affect our operations? What are the key things that we need to do as we go forward? And I think to me that was a hugely motivational message, motivational session as well, where a corporate leader is really looking at how do we really help the government, how do we really help communities and bring about changes on the ground. I think that was very heartening in the first when we just started the whole pandemic. So I have divided the next 7-8 minutes that I'm going to speak about into 5 categories, where these are the 5 broad areas under which the Piramal team is really working on the ground. So first and foremost, food and ration distribution activities have really taken precedence in the relief phase. A lot of people, migrant laborers, homeless people, all these people were completely left with nothing to eat during the lockdown phase. And so the first step was to really look at how do we provide food and ration to these people. So through Annamrit, we actually helped close to about 1.5 crore people now, to whom we are serving khichdi, hot cooked meal, to the homeless and to the migrant population across 14 cities. In addition to this, we've also activated several networks to source food for distribution. We've also created a network of like-minded people within Mumbai and some of the other cities as well, where we are trying to address the food shortage and ration shortage through networks. In Mumbai specifically, we under the request of the BMC, we were able to distribute dry ration to about 70,000 families, close to 3.5 lakh people in containment zones for a period of around 28 days, which is again very critical for those people. We also came up with a set of detailed recommendations on how do we distribute dry ration to BPL families, below poverty line families, regardless of their ration card status. Through the PDS system, is it possible to deliver food to these people? And I think now it is being rolled out in Maharashtra. The second bucket that we are looking at is what Rubina mentioned. How do we leverage our existing programs and projects? So one of the key programs that we've been a part of for almost a decade now is the health helpline programs. So we run health helplines across 8 different states in India: Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. And in all these states, we've actually been able to ramp up our capability, our capacity to handle calls. So if you look at the numbers as of now, we have received close to 1.7 million calls on COVID overall, of which about 45% calls, around 800,000 calls, are only on COVID. And we've actually been able to provide validated information, getting guidelines from different agencies within India, ensuring that the guidelines are updated, evidence is there to whatever we speak, and we're able to provide that validated information to these people, which is a very important part of our work. The second way in which we've looked at health helpline is not just looking at giving information, but also to use it as a platform to deliver some of the other activities. For example, in Assam, the government has been working with us, and we've been able to initiate a scheme called Dhanvantri scheme, wherein what people do is they're able to call 104 and they will be able to place a request for medicines, especially people who are suffering from non-communicable diseases or illnesses that require chronic medications. Those people, especially because of lockdown, they're not able to get those medicines. So they place a call of 104 and we collect that demand. We are able to transfer that information to the district drug officer, who's then able to provide these medicines at the doorsteps of the people. So the government has a caveat that up to 200 rupees, the medicines are free, and above that, the patient will have to bear those charges. But nevertheless, it's a great opportunity for us to reach out to people who are in need of medicines. And as of now, we've been able to take about 13,500 calls, and about 7,500 people, delivery has been made to all the drugs have been delivered to the people's homes. In Assam, we've also done contact tracing of patients, especially the Honorable Health Minister of Assam, Dr. Himanta Biswa Sarma, appealed to all the citizens to call up 104 and actually inform about history of travel, history of symptoms, or anything that is very suspicious. So we were able to actually call up these people, find out what is the situation, and then be able to refer these cases to the right government authorities as well. On this count, we've been able to actually receive about 8,500 specific calls related to COVID-19, and we are able to address tracking of these cases. Furthermore, whenever these individuals get quarantined, it's also important to track them, to ask them what they are doing. Do they have any increase in symptoms? Do they have any challenges which they're facing? So we're doing that as well. And roughly around 21,000 people are being who are being quarantined. We are actually tracking them and getting the right kind of information from them. In Himachal Pradesh, for example, we've also used the helpline for active case finding. So the government actually has prepared a list of people who they feel who they are identified as suspects. And so we are actually tracking those people and finding out what is the current situation. And again, ensuring that there is a connect between the government system and the population. So essentially 104 Health Helpline is not really just a health helpline, but it's actually a platform on which a series of services can be loaded. And in partnership with government, it is possible to do something like that. The third big bucket is the aspirational districts work that we are doing. Again, we work in 25 aspirational districts in partnership with Niti Aayog on a public philanthropic partnership model. And in the last 2 years, we've made a lot of progress in these districts. A lot of indicator movement has happened. So because of COVID-19 now, we are feeling that this is going to really affect all the improvements and changes in indicators that we were able to initiate in these districts. So the first thing that we're doing here is really identifying and tracking all people who have come into these districts. So about 100,000 people across these 25 districts are being tracked. And we do this by two ways. We either call them up and track them, or in some cases, we actually go to their respective homes and track them as well. You're also in partnership with the district magistrate, able to help them really identify places and build quarantine homes, isolation wards, so that these districts are prepared once the cases increase. And by the way, in these aspirational districts, right now, the cases are rising very rapidly. So as of now, there are about 1,000 cases in these 25 aspirational districts, and there have been about 15 deaths. So we have to be very careful in these aspirational districts because they're already burdened with poor health systems. We also had a very strong network with the Panchayati Raj members. So we were able to activate the Panchayati Raj members. So about 18,000 Panchayati Raj institution members have been trained, oriented on COVID-19. What should they do? What should they not do? And how should they actually transmit that information to the local communities? They've also been advised on stigma and discrimination and how do we tackle that. In some cases, they've also been helping us in contact tracing and active surveillance as well. The third big part of our work in the aspirational district was to leverage the religious and faith leaders, and that was a hugely successful project for us. So we were now, during the COVID-19, we've been able to leverage that as well. And about 1,000 faith leaders, and these are religious leaders who are very influential in their communities. We've been able to activate that network, and we've been able to again orient these people on various aspects of COVID-19, which is now going to slowly bear results for us. The other big pillar in the aspirational district is the frontline health workers. So about 50,000 frontline health workers now have been oriented. So in most of these cases, the government has already done the training. So what these frontline health workers need is on-ground support, hand-holding and mentoring. So which is what the Piramal Foundation team does on the field with respect to frontline health workers. The other big aspect of COVID-19 is the disruption of the existing health and nutrition services. So what Shubhra Jyoti mentioned earlier, the Poshan Abhiyan activities, several of those activities have been hampered in the aspirational districts. And Piramal Foundation's team is now trying to see how can we support the district administration in bringing them back on track. So it's important to now come up with new guidelines and new ways in which we can engage with the community, increase the demand for services, and at the same time ensure that the exposure to risk is very low. Risk of COVID-19 is very low. So that's the other big piece of work that we're doing on the field now. And several of these guidelines will actually have to be built ground up. So we need to get their inputs, people's inputs, and then be able to really come up with these guidelines. The last piece related to aspirational district is our work with UNICEF. Actually, Geetanjali is a part of this panel. So with UNICEF, we've been able to work very closely on several aspects, specifically on nutrition and nutrition counseling, on management of chronic, on management of SAM children, the severe acute malnutrition children, who we are trying to address in the aspirational district. So that work is again something that we've been able to push through despite the COVID-19 lockdown. But I must say that the entire nutrition service on the field has certainly taken a hit. I think once the lockdown is lifted, is that when we will get to know what has been the real impact on the nutrition services overall. Last but not least, I think it's also important to understand the the technology piece. I think in these times of COVID, technology is a great enabler. And this webinar, in general, these kinds of sessions would have required people to travel, book a room and deliver a lecture in front of an audience. But now, sitting in the confines of my house, I'm able to actually deliver this, whatever we have learned. I think this is being reflected in the field as well. So several of our initiatives now are technology based. So we are trying to figure out how do we deliver telemedicine services in specifically in the COVID-19 situation. So even before, we were running telemedicine programs in Himachal Pradesh and in Assam. Now what has happened is it has become the need of the hour, and we are able to use that existing network and be able to deliver the services, thereby reducing the risk of exposure as well as increasing the early detection of any other problem apart from COVID-19. Last but not least, as soon as the PM CARES Fund was announced, we also donated 25 crores to the PM CARES Fund. So that's in addition to all these activities that we do. Since Rubina asked what are all the various ways in which the corporate organizations are really helping and supporting the government, I think these are all the ways in which we are supporting the government. And I believe that there is a long way to go further to be able to fight COVID-19. And I don't think we'll be able to do this without partnerships and collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hegde. That was very insightful and gave us a lot of takeaways into how private sector can further contribute to the existing operations and collaborations with government to overcome the COVID situation. There's a lot that we will be coming back to, especially concerning the how do you deal with as things sort of start getting back to our previous normal. How do you deal with the disruptions in services and take into account the migrant workers and them shifting back to their places of residence? So that's something we'll be coming back to. But moving on to our next panelist, we have Ms. Gitanjali from Tata Power DDL, who are again have been one of our earliest pledge partners with Impact for Nutrition and have been doing some really wonderful work providing both meals and dry rations to those in need. So meals are being provided to frontline workers and paramedics, and also they're providing dry rations. And I would ask, I invite Gitanjali to please come and expound further on the kind of work that Tata Power did carrying out in Delhi.
Thank you, Dr. Rubina. It's really a pleasure to attend this panel. So Tata Power Delhi Distribution is basically a joint venture of Tata Power and the government of Delhi. And we are providing electricity in the northwest part of the Delhi. So our key communities are the people residing in the north and northwest Delhi, where we are working since past more than 16 years. And corporate CSR is in Tata Power DDL, we call it Social Innovation Group. It's more into about the innovations we are doing, and the initiative we are doing, it's a bit different from the regular CSR work. So we name it, we brand it our initiative as a Sathi, and that is the umbrella brand we are working under, and we divided and categorized and bucketed our all initiative in different heads. So we call it Unnati, Ujjwal, Club Energy, and Sanjeevani. So each initiative and each pillar represented the initiative, essence of the all initiative. So at Tata, giving back to the society is not a compliance but a culture, and we constantly strive to keep up the legacy of Tata Group. So that is in our DNA. We are trying to do whatever the Tata Group legacy is there. So the world is going through an unprecedented crisis with the outbreak of COVID-19, with millions affected around the world. So the government has been putting a lot of efforts and doing a lot of control and trying to do a lot of measures for stop the spread of this disease. On its part, as Tata Power Delhi, Tata Group has pledged to give rupees 1,500 crores to the community to combat to coronavirus crisis in India. In this direction, if I talk about the Tata Power Delhi itself, we also have undertaken various measures to help the underprivileged community within the outside its area of operation as well. Inside and outside, both within and outside, we are working. And we are doing all initiative in 3 phase-wise manners. So in our initiative dealing with this global pandemic, Tata Power DDL has done various initiative, and we are doing it in phase-wise approach. So if I'll talk about in the first phase, efforts were aimed at providing immediate relief, which is very necessary and very important to the communities in face of the outbreak of COVID and the ensuring lockdown. So this is the first which we started. And in the second phase, initiative were intended towards sensitizing the masses. And phase third, which we are currently is in to move towards a stage of normalcy. As the lockdown is over, how the CSR initiative and the other things we are going to take care of, and what kind of measures we are going to adopt once the normalcy that people are approaching towards normalcy. So in phase one, what all initiative we have done, I just give you a very small brief about those initiatives. So immediate relief with special focus on the food and water and health. That is the most important part and requirement of the people. So going by the immediate requirement of the lockdown and keeping in the mind the safety aspect of all CSR initiative were shut down, we then begin with the immediate relief work by providing food and water facilities. So whatever initiative are that was shut down as the government guidelines, but at the same time we are begin with the immediate relief work. So so we supported Delhi government by sponsoring 3 lakh meal for the underprivileged communities and migrant workers. 20,000 people were provided cooked food, that is a kind of khichdi and other different kind of meals we have provided to 20,000 people with the help of Mini's Kitchen in our area of operation. We also did collaborated with Taj Hotel, and 4,000 meals were distributed in 5 major government hospitals for medical professional and patients. Additionally, realizing the importance of water, which is really very much required, that potable water, the supply of potable water, 31 RO plants, which we already having in our area of operation, and we have established these RO plants, 23 government schools, which are covered into shelter homes, because all these government schools have been changed or converted into the shelter homes or isolation wards. So we have ensured the uninterrupted potable water supply under this COVID-19, and also in 8 JJ clusters were made for these RO plants were fully made functional, and we have ensured that everybody will get desired quantity of water. And we are ensuring continuous potable water supply to more than 1.5 lakh beneficiary every day. So which is very important for the health of the beneficiaries and the people and the communities around. Catering to the next, what we are doing is catering to the health and awareness aspects. So 2 of our mobile dispensary, because we are having 4 mobile dispensaries, so out of the 2 mobile dispensaries were deployed in the communities. And what we are doing is we are distributing masks, and we also sensitizing the masses and especially JJ cluster communities to follow the social distancing and do's and don'ts during COVID-19. So which is very important, because now until unless people are not well aware what are the do's and don'ts and how they can safeguard themselves, it is very important to sensitize all public and masses, so that at least they can strictly follow these do's and don'ts. Second phase, which we we have done, is in during second phase we have extended relief with a special focus on sensitizing and sustainable support. So now, because relief efforts were intended towards understanding the needs of the community by our field staff, if you say, the people who are doing our CSR initiative or associated with us under various initiative, be it our women literacy centers, vocational training centers, or the ABHA project, or our other associated initiative staff, they all have played a very important role in helping the communities and to deal with the pandemic. So they are the touch point, or you can say they are the extended arms who worked day in, day out to support the communities. These needs were then catered through various programs, like whatever we, because they are there in the community, so it is very easy to understand the problems and the things which they are facing on day-to-day basis. So they are coming with lot of inputs, and based on that we are preparing and designing the project. So it is nothing that we have received one request and we are doing everywhere. It is cluster and area wise requirement have come up, and we designed our program based on those requirements. So in that second phase, we distributed dry ration kit for more than 500 families who were identified through our ABHAs and our women literacy instructors, and they are in the needs of the urgency. So what we did in two ways. First is that whatever government schemes were available, we made our touch points and these frontline and NGO staff or associated staff aware that these all are these schemes are already available. So these people were connected the needy ones with the existing scheme. Second, if anyhow they are not able to get the benefit of that existing scheme, we come up with a new idea they have shared with us and we have provided that support. So this works simultaneously. One is that we have leveraged the existing schemes, and at the same time we also supported if we are not able to connecting the dots with the existing schemes. We also facilitated e-ration preparation of various community people. So through our vocational training centers, through our ABHA members, through our WLCs.
So I guess while we are resolving that issue, I will move over to Mr. Parthasarathy from Akzo Nobel. While Gitanjali did raise a number of important and valid points, including the provision of potable water, we will touch upon those shortly. Going over to Akzo Nobel, they have taken many interesting initiatives, including providing essential food items to nearly 1,500 family members of daily wage earners, and partnering with the Faridabad district prison to create and manufacture 20,000 triple layered masks, which is no small task. So moving over to Mr. Parthasarathy, if you could please talk more about these initiatives and others that are being carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. So good afternoon to all, and it's really a pleasure to be here among all the esteemed members. So basically, when we started the relief operations of COVID-19, we didn't have much of a clue because we didn't know for how many days it's going to be there, what should strategy ideally. So how it started is that we started with a distribution of dye ration items, because clearly that was the first need, because we are hearing a lot of cases of daily wage laborers who were struggling to meet daily needs. So we started with that. So we have provided dye ration kits to over 50,000 family members of daily wage laborers, and we did primarily in cities because that is where the need was majorly. So we started that. Apart from that, we provide education to almost 10,000 children. We collaborate with government for that. So we ensure that these children get regular food. How we did that is that we provided again dye ration kit for a month to all of them to ensure at least midday meal is not stopped for them. The second thing we did. Then what we did is that we provided, because again, if you remember a couple of months back, there was a huge demand for PPE kits, and it was not available for the health workers and even for the police force. So we were getting a lot of requests for that. So we provided around 5,000 PPE kits, primarily to the frontline health workers and also to the police people, again, in almost all major cities of India. Then another thing we did is that we provided, the example you gave, because when we were planning to get procure mask, and unfortunately India, there was even a hoarding going on. So even a 10 rupees mask was being sold at 30, 40 rupees. That was very unfortunate. So we thought, what should be the ideal solution for it? So the good part was that we already having a partnership with Faridabad district prison. We run a skill training program in decorative paints for the prison inmates. So it's a part of the prison rehabilitation program. So once the student completes the jail term, we rehabilitate them back to the society and provide them the a job of a painter. So we had a discussion with them and they were very happy to start this initiative. So we started with 20,000 masks, and you won't believe that the cost of mask was as less as ₹4. So with that money, it meant that we are getting more and more masks for the slum dwellers, for the health workers, even for the police personnel. So the partnership is still going on with them. Then the telemedicine, we are currently working with telemedicine in Bangalore, Bangalore rural. We are working with closely 15,000 villages. We have three telemedicine units. So especially during COVID times, most of the villagers didn't want to go to the hospital because they felt that if they go there, probably the chances of getting the disease is more. So they had this apprehension. We found a solution that how we can do it through telemedicine. So we developed a tablet, e-tablet, through which they can directly discuss with their problems with the doctors. And if only there is a need, and if the doctor felt that there is such a case of that, then only they were sent to the hospital. So we screened almost 1,800 villages through telemedicine. Apart from that, so we are keeping on engagement with the children, because as I said that we are working with 10,000 children all over India. The private school students are a bit more fortunate because they have online classes going on, but unfortunately for the government school children, there hasn't been much of engagement. So what, wherever possible, like technology is a great enabler. We created WhatsApp group for the children. We gave them tasks. We continuously engaged with them. We use creativity to engage with them whatever way, and we are still doing it. So largely, you can say that these have been some of the initiatives of us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Parthasarathy. Excellent points that you raised up, excellent work that is going on, especially considering that you're taking into account helping to keep the children from the government schools also engaged education-wise. I think that's a wonderful initiative. Going back to Gitanjali.
Yeah, now I'm audible.
Yes,
Okay.
you're audible. So just a quick brief about what you were going to say, and then we'll move on to specific questions. And we have our participants also who have a number of questions to ask you. So if you could give us a brief about what you were saying, and we move on to specific questions based on your initiatives.
Okay, so apart from distributing various dry ration and connecting people with the existing scheme, what we started is like we are also starting doing various ongoing initiative, how we are going to take the second lead in it. So once we also started creating awareness, and at the same time we are utilizing our already digital platforms for creating awareness and doing our ongoing initiative projects. So like women literacy projects or our vocational training centers, we asked our staff to started taking making few videos and tutorials and sending it to respective students, because next step that how we are going to do our CSR initiative once the lockdown is over, and how we are going to take the benefit of our digital skills, because in COVID pandemic the things are very things are almost changed, and people are looking forward that how we are going to do CSR in the days to come. So that way, in our vocational training center and women literacy centers, we asked people to utilize maximum number of available platforms. TCS, we also have collaborated with TCS, and many virtual classes are available where students are visiting and taking benefit of it. We also have started a project under Hak Darshak, and with the help of Hak Darshak, we are facilitating the people for making various e-ration card and other schemes. Under our self-help group projects, we have made more than 3 lakhs masks, and we have also supported various other PPE models. More than 50,000 cloth marks also have been prepared by SHG, and the sale and the benefit has went to the SHGs, and through which they have started earning. Tata Sons has also sponsored 417 COVID-19 test kit through Tata Power DDL, and these have been supplied to the Delhi government. And one kit can carry out as many as 100 individual tests. So this is continuous efforts we are doing, and we are doing various program under COVID-19. And if we talk about the moving towards normalcy, phase 3, that is the resumption of our regular CSR activities. So a major part of our efforts in this phase has been in keeping the community safe and healthy, which is the most important concern for us. And we have resumed our main CSR activities, namely women literacy and vocational training, ABA, RO plants, and mobile dispensary, by taking advantage of latest technology solutions. We are making following all the rules and guidelines that way. Basically, it is through digital platform only. Nobody is moving, and classes are organized and communities are being sensitized by various online platforms and video bites. And RO plants and mobile dispensary are facilitating people the way it is required. So basically, this is all from our side. In Tata Power DDL is committed to provide support and facilitating communities in the best possible manner. So thank you. Over to Rubina.
Thank you so much, Gitanjali, for wrapping that up so beautifully. And there's so many wonderful things that that Tata Power is carrying out, and I'm sure participants do have a number of questions related. My first question, however, is for Dr. Hegde, and one of the major focus of your work, of the relief operations at Piramal Swasthya has been towards creating awareness and offering a helpline. What are the reasons that Piramal Swasthya moved in this direction where concerns relief operations? Why was this your choice of provision of relief?
So if you look at the COVID-19 pandemic and the disease itself, right? So at this point in time, there is no, the treatment is not definite. Vaccine is yet to be found and yet to be yet to be found for COVID-19. Um, Community awareness and community knowledge related to COVID-19 is such an important aspect of prevention that once you prevent the disease, you have a much higher chance of reducing the morbidity, mortality related to COVID-19. So I think awareness, knowledge, social distancing, hand hygiene, all these things are very important. And together you can actually call them as social vaccines. So Piramal Swasthya anyway believes in providing this particular piece of information, knowledge to people, and thereby making them that much more empowered to be able to address COVID-19. That has been a philosophy for Swasthya for a very long time. And I think COVID-19 provided an opportunity to demonstrate further what can be done with good knowledge, good awareness related to a particular condition. So I think that was the primary reason why we chose it. The secondary reason, of course, was we had a network, we had a platform available to deliver that. And I think we've been able to leverage that platform, that network to be able to provide that information. It's basically an advantage that I have, and I'm using that advantage to create a much greater advantage. That's how we've looked at it.
Thank you, Dr. Hegde. Moving over to, since it's an Impact for Nutrition platform, and both you as well as AkzoNobel and Tata Power DDL have been focused on have also contributed towards food distribution. I wanted to know from Gitanjali, and also the other panelists may also pitch in, is that how do you ensure dietary balance and a balanced provision in your through your dry ration kits, through your cooked meals? How do you ensure that those meals that you are providing, or that dietary ration that you are providing, is nutritionally balanced, has not just the carbs and the proteins, but also has vitamins and minerals? If Gitanjali could take the question.
So, as you know that Tata Power management has advised us that we have to distribute the basic food items like wheat, pulses and rice, along with the preparation material, support material like oil, spices. The reason being, several people in need of the essential item, as we know in India that rice and pulses in combination complement one another, and their nutritional component includes both protein and vitamins and minerals. So that way it's a dietary balance, if you can say. Other reason that target group was the people who know to well aware about in these ingredients, and that is they are using on day-to-day basis as well, and they have full knowledge of the preparing this food. So dal chawal, I'm saying that pulses and the rice we have provided along with the wheat. That way we say that that is easy to cook, and at the same time that need a less number of spices as well. And step to follow, especially the maintain the hygiene standard, and also the NGOs were already advised to take all the material from the registered vendors, and they have duly checked it that whatever material we are purchasing and procuring, that should be from the registered vendor, from where we have purchased for our canteens and the nearby locations. And at the same time, all the NGO partners were sensitized, duly sensitized. So once it is done, we have made and we have taken care that every food packet have the number of items which is advised by the management and the people. And when we went for the distribution as well, we have our touch point in the communities who have already made the list of the people, and they were ready with the taking care of the social distancing. NGO people went with the following all the norms, which is like taking care of wearing the mask and gloves and the sanitizer. and they have invited people one by one, so that have been taken care very specifically. And even in cooked meal, what we did is Minnie's Kitchen is a very known kitchen for providing good quality food. So once before distributing to the people, people have tested it before the distribution, and at the same time we have taken a lot of feedback on everyday basis. So that two three steps we have follow in a very specific manner, and the people in the community were well sensitized and advised that whatever we are doing for the benefit of the people, and the number are already defined and everybody will get it. So the people were very heartily welcomed all these initiatives, and this is done in a very specific and a very following all the rules we have did it. So NGOs and the touch points have helped us to do it in a very good manner, keeping all the norms. So that is what we did for this initiative. So over to you, Dr. Rupina.
Thank you. Other panelists want to add something to this? How have you ensured the nutritional, that you've provided nutritionally sound dry rations to the beneficiaries? Have you taken any specific steps, included any specific foods in the dry ration kit?
Actually, so basically we had prepared guidelines, which we had circulated to all the NGO members to ensure that is a balanced and nutrition food is ensured. And we are also kept in mind from because we have worked across India, because so different states have different requirements. The local population follows a particular diet. So we have also kept in mind that thing. And wherever we work with district administration, so there are many cases where district administration has also given us guidelines, which particular food articles should be kept in the food kit. So that we have done.
So what does a typical food kit that you are offering consist of?
So basically it consists of the wheat or rice, whatever as per the region. Then there's the edible oil, then the salt, there's the sugar. So according to there will be local masalas, wherever required. And then, requirement of tea and, sugar, wherever the case comes from.
Dr. Hegde, has any measure been taken to provide a nutritionally high nutritive quality food to pregnant women and those who have just had babies during this period and have gotten affected by the lockdown? Do you know of any such initiatives, or has Piramal Swasthya undertaken any such initiative?
No, I think that's a very, very great question. Very valid. There are two aspects to it. First one is through the Annamrit program that we were running, that was that we are continuing to be a part of. There it is hot cooked meal, where the food is already, we know what are the nutritive qualities and quantities that are necessary and made available accordingly. Also, this Annamrit scheme was basically for the school children in the pre-COVID times, which was therefore tested for the right kind of quality and quantity of the food to be provided. So nutrition is of topmost priority for cooked meal anyways. That's one. The second component, specifically to pregnant women and children, I don't think there are specific examples which have looked at providing any additional nutrition in these times specifically. I can confidently tell that some of the existing programs itself, existing interventions itself, have been hit very badly during this period. So I think now the data may not be even available, but the last I checked, the percentage of several regular initiatives have come down significantly. The percentage of institutional deliveries, percentage of immunization coverage, percentage of people receiving NCD drugs, and also nutritive services, all have come down. So in these times, I think it would be very difficult to actually comment upon what would be, how much the food quality has affected specifically for pregnant women and children. At least from what I know, we have not really specifically looked at providing a different nutritive diet for pregnant women and children. Yeah, but that's a good point, and I think we will certainly relook at some of that aspects. Thank you, Rubina.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We have a question from one of the participants. They've asked if there are any initiatives to cater to SAM and MAM children amidst COVID-19 since they are more vulnerable. This has been asked by Saba Naz. Any of the panelists who want to take up this question? Any specific initiatives for SAM and MAM children?
Yeah, I think vulnerable communities as a whole, I think I would like to take that question. SAM and MAM children are one category of vulnerable population. Older people specifically are another category of vulnerable population. So through our sister concern, the Piramal Foundation for Education Leadership, we are running a program called the Surakshit Dada Dadi Nana Nani campaign, which is basically a program focusing on 25 aspirational districts of all individuals over the age of 65 years. So there are roughly about 2 million older people in these populations, in these districts, and they are a certainly a vulnerable group for us. So the education arm is tracking them, providing them with specific care, ensuring that they are safe and sound, and providing or addressing whatever their concerns are. The second group, as Sabha has mentioned here, is certainly the malnourished children. Even if we are able to address the existing, malnourished children with existing interventions, even that is good enough. There is, I don't see, at least for whatever I have read, I have not seen any specific food requirement or a specific dietary requirement for the prevention of COVID-19. I think what is really important is to ensure that these children are identified, they are kept in such a way that they are not exposed to the risk of getting infected, and ensure that they get the right kind of nutrition according to their age and according to their requirement. I don't think there's anything specific for COVID-19, at least not that I've come across.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another one of our questions, one that I too had, is how has COVID-19 impacted the provision of midday meals in rural areas, and what support are the corporates providing towards addressing this issue? This has been asked by Malay Das. Again, anybody who, it's not directed to any specific panelists.
So, I can speak about primarily in urban areas because that is where we mainly work. So in urban areas, wherever we are working, we continue to provide midday meal, and we working with the government schools for that. So there have been in cases where children have not been able to come to the school, we have ensured that the child ration kids at least reach their homes. So that was we have taken care of.
Okay. Thank you so much. Romira Roy has asked, what are some of the initiatives being taken on by corporates over here to build the capacity of their social sector partners, especially in the times of project extensions owing due to lockdown restrictions?
So I can answer that. So, big change. It's been just 2.5 months that we are facing this issue, and I can see almost all the major NGOs of India have already working in COVID-19. So in terms of capacity, I think most of them have very competent team, and they have already we didn't have to do anything to build their capacity as such, because it's a very short time period. Probably in the longer run, we may look at measures how we can build up the capacity, but I think most of them have adapted well, and almost all major NGOs are currently working in COVID-19 relief.
Okay. We have a question by Giriraj Tomar. For the workers who have come here from outside their own villages, how is the employment system being made so that they can live here and earn their livelihood? For those who've come in from outside, how?
Tough question. I don't know if the other panelists would be able to answer that, but I don't think we've really, at least we've not really specifically looked at that particular aspect. I would also think that this is going to be a big challenge over the next 6 to 18 months, especially if these people are not willing to come back to the urban societies where they were a part of as migrant laborers, that will also have deep impact on the work that's being done in these places. So if somebody is involved in construction business, somebody is involved in road construction, so all of those things will be affected. Honestly, at this point in time, I don't know if there are specific interventions that are being put in place for employment for these migrant laborers in these districts where they've come back to. And I think there is some degree of expert opinion required from the people from that particular sector. I think I'm not expert on that.
Yeah, what I can say is that, because one of the major portfolios we have, Axolabel has, is providing skill training because we are a paint company, providing skill training in decorative paints and vehicle paints. So, definitely, like at least if you see typically painters, most of them work with independent contractors. It's a primarily self-employment mode. So basically, there's a requirement in all cities of India, all major cities or major towns, and even in villages. So what definitely, and this for the same reason that, apart from the big cities, we have training centers in the B and C grade towns also. But unfortunately, we didn't see too many numbers of enrollment in those places because people wanted to go outside and earn money. But suddenly I see there's an opportunity, to provide self-employment or, to how to earn your own employment through, I can talk about the training we provide, like training in decorative paints. So that is type of self-employment. I definitely see like, more and more people will probably come for such trainings where, they can stay back, in their hometowns.
Thank you, Mr. Parthasarathy. We have a question from Simran Sharma to Ms. Gitanjali. How can we educate rural communities if they don't have access to mobiles or laptops or any other digital media network?
Very good question. Simran, actually, whatever we have planned based on the availability before starting these digital classes, we have thoroughly checked and, we dig out that how many people and the registered beneficiaries have these mobiles. So definitely it is only possible when the people have have their mobiles and the digitally equipped, only then we can run these sessions. Without that, definitely what we are planning is the people who do not have these facilities, we will in future, once this lockdown and the guidelines will come up, that we will invite them in a very small group. Like instead of asking for 5 or 7 batch, we will only invite 1 or 2 people and taking care of the social distancing, and then we organize various kind of classes and all. So definitely without digital support, we cannot run any classroom and these classes. This is definitely a hurdle, but many of our beneficiaries, husbands and kids, are having mobiles, and due to lockdown everybody is at home, so they are taking benefit of that. So that way we are able to reach out to maximum number of people. Definitely without that it's not possible to organize. Then only one-to-one classes is the only way to do it.
Another question by Simran Sharma is, how can startups or small companies or NGOs collaborate with big companies in their CSR projects, especially during the lockdown? For any of our panelists who wish to answer the question.
So I think, again, not an expert specifically, but this is something that we've discussed a bit. And I feel that it's very critical for startups and NGOs to align themselves to the needs of the communities in these times. And I think that while Parthasarathy and Gitanjali also will agree to me that bigger organizations are also looking at the same thing. They're also looking at how do we align to what are the community needs. I think it's very critical to identify that particular alignment to what the community requires, what the bigger organizations are looking at, and then find a niche for each of those organizations. I don't think there is a straight answer to that question, and I think there is some degree of innovation that is necessary, a lot of thinking that is necessary in order to address that particular aspect. I don't think it's a simple, straightforward answer.
Okay. Does any other panelist want to add to that?
No, I completely agree with Dr. Shailendra. What did he say? Like, because every organization is now looking for innovative projects, innovative ways. But definitely some areas will get a push, like for example, digital education, for example, telemedicine, wherever technology can enable, can help, in reaching the poorest of the poor. So definitely that those areas will be more looked into by corporates. I'm talking from a CSR point of view.
Okay. Well, if there is nothing more to add, and we've had a fair share of questions, I would like to close now. And before that, thank everyone, because it's been an absolutely wonderful session, very interactive, and of course there is a third webinar expected. So, any more questions could always be asked during the next webinar. And I would really like to thank the panelists, Dr. Hegde, Mr. Parthasar, Anjali, for contributing so wonderfully. I quick wishes to collaborate Feedback for Nutrition platform. You can please send a one-line email to shweta@csrbox.org. And I hand over now to Shubhra Jyoti, who will be concluding the session. Shubhra.
So thanks a lot, Rubina. I think it was a wonderful, informative, and a very good discussion which we have had over here. And my personal thank you to all the three panelists, Dr. Shailendra, Gitanjali, and Parthasarthi, because they've added a lot of value to this conversation. And also a lot of thanks to the attendees. I mean, I'm not giving a formal thank you, but this is from my side. So I would just like to invite Bhawmik, one of our initiative partners from the box, to please say the vote of thanks for everybody. Bhawmik has been a key member, and I think everybody on this panel and most of the attendees must be knowing him. So yeah, over to you, Bhawmik.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you, Shubhro and the team. Probably this was really insightful discussion that how corporates are looking at connecting, collaborating, and finding new avenues to connect with the community and responding to the situation which arises at times, which really forces us to think beyond the boxes or beyond our comfort zone. So COVID-19 was a situation which really forced each one of the players in the ecosystem, be it non-profit, be it government, be it corporate, or even the community, beyond what we have ever imagined, and providing new way doing at least the way we are right now interacting with CSR projects and partnerships will evolve. And probably the focus is also how we connect with the communities in next 12 months, because that's going to be a challenging time frame for us. One, connecting, maintaining social distancing, and then continuing the impactful work. So that's definitely communicating with the community. At the same time, it will also help us to look at connecting and collaborating among ourselves. One company partnering with another company in the same geography, that's going to be a new normal, where we'll find new private sector collaborations happening, new private philanthropy collaborations happening at a large regional partners, new regional collaboratives coming in on various thematic and sub-thematic area. So that's a one learning probably which we are deriving now, and we are experiencing it at various fronts. But one thing which is emerging in a new facets. So digital volunteering, virtual volunteering, also deriving new things in terms of how things are happening in their projects at the local level. So they're also coming some kind of learning to reinvent the businesses and the workplace learnings that they have to learn out of the community engagement. So many new things will come definitely, and probably we are going to document many of these learnings and share with the various stakeholders in the coming days. We already released one COVID-19 response report by various players on the platform. and we'll come up with more case studies and other things in the coming days. And probably when we do the next webinar, session 3 of this series, probably we'll have more experiences coming from the ground. So thanks a lot to everyone for joining us in this session.